The night shift at Harlow County Dispatch was quiet, the way it always was on Tuesday nights in November. Sarah Monroe had worked this job for 11 years. She knew the sounds of the building by heart, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the low murmur of the police scanner, the occasional creak of the walls settling into the cold. She was on her third cup of coffee when the call came in at 2:17 a.m. 911, what's your emergency? The woman on the other end sounded older, maybe 70, her voice thin with the particular worry of someone who almost didn't call. She introduced herself as Mrs. Caldwell. She lived on Ember Lane, she said. She was calling about her neighbor's house, number 412. Sarah's hand stopped moving. 412 Ember Lane. She hadn't heard that address spoken out loud in almost 2 years, not since the paramedics radioed it in on a cold February morning when her mother, Eleanor Monroe, was found by the mail carrier. Heart attack, 67 years old, gone before the ambulance arrived. The house had been on the market ever since. Sarah couldn't bring herself to sell the furniture, couldn't bring herself to go back. "Mom," Sarah said, keeping her voice level. Professional, the way 11 years of training made automatic. "Can you describe what you're seeing?" Mrs. Caldwell said there was a light on inside, the living room window, and a woman, grey-haired, sitting in a rocking chair, visible through a gap in the curtains, just rocking, talking to herself. Sarah dispatched a unit, Officers Crawford and Bell. Routine wellness check, possible trespasser. Her voice didn't waver when she relayed the address, but she stayed on the line with Mrs. Caldwell. She told herself it would procedure. It wasn't. "Can you still see her?" Sarah asked. "Yes. She hasn't moved much, just rocking and talking. I can't make out what she's saying." Sarah's pen tapped the desk 3 times without her realizing it. She made herself stop. "Can you describe what the woman is wearing?" A pause. Mrs. Caldwell was squinting through the dark, she said. Then, some kind of robe, or a house coat, blue, I think, with little white flowers on it. Sarah set her pen down. Her mother had a blue house coat she wore every single morning without exception. Cotton, small white flowers across the fabric. She'd had it for 15 years. It was still hanging on the back of the bedroom door at 412 Ember Lane, because Sarah had never been able to take it down. She breathed slowly, in, out. "Mrs. Caldwell, can you hear anything at all? Any words?" A longer pause this time. Then carefully. "She keeps saying a name, something like Sarah, and something about a stove. She keeps repeating it. I told her about that stove, over and over." The fluorescent light above Sarah's desk buzzed once and flickered. The last conversation Sarah Monroe ever had with her mother was an argument, 1 week before Eleanor died. Sarah had driven out to check on her and noticed the old gas stove clicking even when all the burners were off. A warning sign, a gas problem, something that needed replacing. She told her mother. Her mother waved her off, said it was fine, said Sarah always worried too much about everything. Sarah left frustrated and tired and told herself she'd bring it up again the next visit. There was no next visit. I told her about that stove. Officers Crawford and Bell arrived at 412 Ember Lane at 2:34 a.m. Sarah listened to their radio check-in with her headset pressed tight to her ear. The front door was locked. No signs of forced entry. They circled the perimeter. All windows secure. They used the non-emergency key kept on file. Sarah had never removed it from the system, and went inside. The house was empty. No one in the living room. No one in the bedroom. The kitchen, the bathroom, the small back porch, all clear. Crawford's voice came through flat and unbothered. No subject on premises. Might have been a shadow, light playing through the curtains. Rocking chair is here, living room. No one in it. A pause. Still moving though. Huh. Sarah told them to document and clear. They did. She logged the call, closed the ticket, and sat at her desk for the remaining 3 hours of her shift without taking another call. She just sat there, watching the cursor blink on her dispatch screen. When 6 o'clock came, she drove to Ember Lane. She told herself she only needed to see it, to confirm it was nothing, to close whatever had cracked open inside her chest somewhere around 2:17 a.m. and hadn't shut since. The key was still on her keychain. She had never removed that either. The house smelled the way it always had. Old wood, pine cleaner, something underneath that she couldn't name. Just the specific warmth of that specific house, a smell that existed nowhere else on earth. Except now there was something else layered beneath it. Lily of the Valley, her mother's perfume. Sarah stood in the hallway and didn't move for a long moment. She walked slowly through each room. The rocking chair sat still in the living room. The bedroom door was half open, the blue housecoat hanging exactly where it had always hung. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place, almost nothing. On the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl, was a recipe card, her mother's handwriting, apple pie. The recipe Sarah had searched for when they were clearing the house after the funeral and could not find anywhere. She had pulled every drawer, every cabinet, every old cookbook on the shelf. It wasn't there. She had assumed it was thrown away by accident during the chaos of those first numb weeks. She had cried about it privately more than once. Something small and specific to cry about when the larger grief was too large to hold. The card looked fresh, not aged, not dusty, like it had been set on the counter that morning by someone who had just walked out of the room. Sarah picked it up with both hands. That was when the phone rang, the landline. Old, cream-colored, mounted to the kitchen wall. It should not have been working. Sarah had suspended the service herself when the house went on the market. She remembered making that call. She remembered thinking it was one of the saddest phone calls she had ever made. Cancelling her mother's phone number, letting it go back into the system to become some stranger's number eventually. It rang a second time. She answered it. Static at first. The kind that sits right at the edge of sounding like something. Almost like breath. Almost like a room with someone in it. Then it cleared, the way a radio station slides into signal when you crest a hill, and her mother's voice came through the line, warm, unhurried, the way it sounded on Sunday mornings when nothing was wrong and there was nowhere to be. I told you about that stove, baby. A small laugh, quiet and fond. Now check behind it. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the kitchen with the receiver in one hand and the recipe card in the other. She set them both down. She moved to the stove, gripped the sides of it, and pulled it away from the wall. In the narrow gap between the back of the appliance and the baseboard, sitting in the dust, was a small fireproof lockbox. Grey, old. It had been there a long time. Inside was a letter. Sarah Monroe had written it 2 months before she died. In careful, unhurried handwriting, she explained a second life insurance policy she had taken out without mentioning it. She knew Sarah would argue, she wrote, so she simply hadn't said anything. There was a savings account, a policy number, specific instructions for what to do with the house. Not sell it, she wrote. Fix the stove. Keep it. And at the bottom, in the last lines of the last page, where her mother's handwriting had gotten smaller and softer, as though she was running out of room or out of time or both. I knew you'd find this the hard way, because you never once listened to me while I was around to say things out loud. That's all right. You found it. That's what matters. Don't cry too long. I love you more than you know how to sit still for. Mom. Sarah Monroe sat down on the kitchen floor. She laughed first, then she cried. Then she did both at the same time, holding a letter her mother wrote 2 months before the end, in a house that smelled like lily of the valley with no flowers anywhere inside it. The wellness check was logged and closed without incident. No subject found on premises. No signs of trespassing or forced entry. Rocking chair movement attributed to a draft from a poorly sealed window. That's what the report said. Sarah never corrected it. She fixed the stove. She kept the house. And every November, on Tuesday nights, she works the same shift and leaves the living room light on when she leaves, in case anyone passing by needs to see it.